Hi everyone, this is the second video in the Theme 2 GCSE Building a Business recap videos. The best advice I would give you with this is grab a bit of paper or download the PDFs in the description and take this blank canvas and make notes as you go. So I'm going to put some basic notes up on the screen. Apologies in advance for my handwriting, and then I'm going to add to that with some talking around it as well. And so you might find that you want to make a few more notes than appear on the screen, but hopefully it shouldn't be any more than sort of 20-25 minutes little recap of all of theme 2.2. So this is the market mix. The market mix comes up in theme 1 as well, in 1.4, but this is where we go through it in a bit more detail. So we start looking at a few more of the theories and kind of the things that need to be understood at a bit of a higher level. So we're going to start with product, then we're going to go to price, promotion, and place. Some of these are pretty short. There's not a huge amount of depth in the GCSE in some of these areas. In particular, 2.2.5, we'll probably spend no more than 15 seconds on. Product, though, there's quite a little bit to product. So we're going to talk about some of the theories involved in 2.2.1. The first is the design mix, and the design mix set out the priorities that a business has when they are designing a product or a service. Now, this is going to be different for every single business, but they're going to revolve around these three priorities, really. And it's always displayed, this design mix is always displayed in this kind of triangle. So we've got our aesthetics, we've got our function, and we've got our economic manufacture. And depending on where you read it, it might say economic cost, but they mean the same thing. So our aesthetics are how the product appeals to the senses. This is going to depend on what the product is. If it's, for example, a perfume, it's going to be how it smells. If it's a chocolate bar, it's how it tastes. If it's a piece of clothing, it might be how it feels versus also how it looks. The function is just how well it works. How well does it do the thing it's supposed to do? And economic manufacture and cost is just how much it costs to make. So different products will have different priorities depending really on the kind of product that they are. So if we think about a product that probably most focuses on aesthetics, you think about a Ferrari. Now, naturally, of course, it's important that the car works, but the more important thing is how it looks. That's what justifies its price. They're probably not worried. Ferrari probably aren't worried about economic manufacturing costs. They don't really care about how much it costs to make a Ferrari because they know they're going to sell it for a really high price. Economic cost, on the other hand, a business like Aldi, for example, with their own brand cereal, they might prioritize economic cost because naturally they want to be able to produce the product for as low a cost as possible so that they can charge a really, really low price. Taste is obviously really important, so the aesthetics has a little bit of importance, but probably not as important as the price it costs, the amount it costs to make, because they're not really focused on being the best tasting, they're focused on being the cheapest. In terms of function, a good example would be like a microwave or a Hoover. It doesn't really matter what it looks like, as long as it's not hideously ugly. The main thing is that does it do what it's supposed to do? Does it do its job? So for the design mix, it's just about which of those three priorities, and it might be two of those three, a business is kind of focusing on when they make their decisions when they're designing it. The second theory we're going to have a look at is the product life cycle. So this has a bit of a graph. The graph looks a little bit different for every product because some products have really quick kind of peaks and others last really, really long times. But we're looking at the amount of sales a business gets or a product gets over a period of time. And the idea behind the product life cycle is that every product has these 4 stages. Now, some products, these stages last 9 months, they'll go through all 4. For other products, it might be 100 years in and they're still not at the end of their life cycle. The key thing is it's different for each business, but they'll all have these 4 stages. So the first stage is the introduction stage. This is where the product is being launched. This is where the product is being marketed quite heavily, trying to make people aware of the product and aware of what it is. So you probably spend quite a lot of money at that point in terms of building that product up and trying to gain it some reputation. Now, where you would go from there is, from that introduction stage, you start going into growth. And this is where obviously sales are continuing to rise. We're approaching our peak. We're spending a lot of money on, again, advertising, making sure people are aware of the product. But hopefully now we're starting to gain some brand reputation. We're starting to gain some image, maybe some loyalty from some consumers. And then eventually that is going to reach that peak. And that peak is what we call our maturity stage. For some businesses, the maturity comes and goes. For others, it can last a long time. I mentioned, for example, Coca-Cola or dairy milk. Those products have been going for a long, long time, over 100 years. And they're still really not showing any signs of slowing down, really. So their maturity's lasted a really, really long time. For other products, it might not last very long at all, and they might find themselves in the final stage, which is the decline stage, actually pretty quickly. Now, we've got decisions to make when we get to the decline phase. Some businesses will, if they've got, especially if they've got other products that are earlier on in the phase where they might be able to like just take over, they might be willing to just let a product die out if it's kind of had its time, if it's been replaced, for example. If that's not the case, businesses might try and do something to try and get as many sales out of it as they possibly can. So they might implement what we call an extension strategy. And an extension strategy is just where a business does something different to try and increase the amount of sales, to try and keep it going for a little bit longer. So for example, it might be redesigning the product slightly, it might be advertising, it might be something like that they're doing to try and, or maybe finding an alternative use for a product just to try and get a little bit few more sales out of it while they can. Now it's worth giving an example here. If we think about like the iPad, Apple noticed that the iPad was reaching its decline phase. People were starting to realize that there was quite a lot of cross functionality between a smartphone, I should say. And so people weren't buying tablets as much. So they made some extension strategy decisions. They decided that they were going to bring out the iPad mini, which was aimed more towards a younger audience and parents of children, and the iPad Pro, which was aimed more towards professionals. And by doing that, by just differentiating their product a little bit, they allowed the iPad to just live on a little bit longer. And that's obviously really important to them. If, say, for example, the iPhone 16 reaches the end of its life cycle, and we'll talk about technology more broadly in a second, they probably won't mind so much because they know that they'll have the next iPhone probably in the introduction or growth stages. And so that's one thing that's worth mentioning. Technology is such a big focus in this course. So it's worth mentioning that actually technology products often have quite short life cycles, mainly because of the vast amounts of innovation. And so a product can be innovated and be out of date completely within 6 months to a year. So for example, an iPhone's out of date probably 6 months after it's released. There's a new version coming. There's competitors like Samsung who have brought out versions just as high-tech, if not more high-tech. They don't mind that necessarily. They know that it has a short window, which is why probably before they've even released the iPhone 17, they're working on the iPhone 18. So they're already working on what's to come. Now, all of this links to the concept in terms of a product of trying to gain a differentiating feature. So a differentiating feature or differentiation is trying to create a way of making a product stand out amongst its competition. So by doing this, what we're hopefully going to achieve is, a situation by which we can maybe charge a higher price. Now, we think about aesthetics, function, and economic manufacture. That could be the source of our differentiating feature. But it's also worth bearing in mind that not every business wants to have a differentiated feature. Some businesses might be like, actually, do you know what? We don't want to be super differentiated. We just want to be low price. Think about the businesses focused on economic cost. In which case, their differentiating factor as a business is that their price is low and actually their products aren't, that high in quality. So that's 2.2.1. 2.2.2 is pretty straightforward, really. There's not a huge amount in here. It's pretty much just high price, low price. The A level has a lot more depth. The A level has a lot more information in terms of different pricing strategies. In the GCSE, you just need to kind of understand the concept of high price versus low price and situations in which this might be suitable. So we'll start with high price. Obviously, it goes without saying that it must be of a sufficient quality. You can't charge a high price for low quality products. Well, you can. You're probably just not going to make very many sales. Now, this alludes to 2.2.5, which is using the market mix, and it's mainly just about the market mix working together, because what we're effectively saying here is that your price has to match your product. Your products are high quality, you can have a high price. If your products are of a low quality, you're probably going to have a low price. Now, when we have a high price, we probably are going to make more money on each sale. We might make more profit on each sale, and there's more on profit margins in the 2.4 video. But we probably will sell a lower volume of sales because the product being a higher price might price some people out of the market. Naturally, the lower a price, the more likely you are going to be to sell higher volumes. Of course, the opposite of this is true for low price. Probably less differentiated, likely to have lower profit margins. You might make less money per sale, but you will likely have a higher volume of sales. So this would be, we mentioned earlier, Aldi as an example for the economic manufacturer. The low price system would be the one that they're going for. There's a bunch of different factors that affect the price that you set. So for example, your brand. We're going to talk about branding more when we do methods of promotion, but branding in particular. If you've got a brand that's known for quality, you might be able to justify the higher price because of that brand image, because of that reputation, potentially that loyalty. Technology is also a big factor as well. And this can work in both ways. So if you have like a really innovative technical feature that potentially could be a differentiating factor, you potentially could charge a higher price because the technology makes the product differentiated. However, alternatively, you could have a piece of technology that allows you to produce products at a lower cost. So, for example, a really good piece of machinery that allows you to reduce the costs of making a product. And if that's the case, you potentially could then charge a lower price because of the technology allowing you to have lower costs. And then the final thing that's worth mentioning is competition. If you don't have very much competition, or if you're much better than your competition, that's going to lead to a higher price. However, if you've got a lot of competition, or if your product maybe isn't as good as some of the competition, then naturally you would probably go for a lower price. But that's all there is really to say in terms of pricing in this course. Promotion, there's a little bit more to say. So 2.2.3 promotion. When we talk about methods of promotion, we're going to go through a bunch of them, and we'll talk about the advantages and disadvantages of each one. We'll start with the classic, so advertising. There's loads of different versions of advertising: TV, radio, print, online. Online obviously is probably the more prevalent one now, but it's worth mentioning some of the older versions as well. And the key thing with this is we're trying to link towards our target audience with our advertising. So for example, if you're advertising on TV and you're targeting young women or teenage girls, probably putting an advert around Love Island is probably going to be really successful because they're going to see it, because they're watching that kind of show. If you're targeting people interested in sport, you might put it on during a football match or something like that. If you are targeting maybe an older audience in terms of radio, you could put an advert on classical FM. Target people who listen to classical FM, more likely going to be an older audience. In terms of print, this one's even easier really. There's so many different magazines and things like that are so specific to certain niches. So for example, targeting children's, if it's children's toys, you put it in children's magazines. If it's a sports piece of equipment, put it in, men's health or women's health or health and fitness magazines. Naturally, you can kind of see how that works. Online is a bit broader because obviously you can advertise on certain websites and you might be able to potentially link to an audience that way. But of course, the key thing here is everyone's online, and so you can potentially advertise online and gain a really wide audience, especially if you're a mass market product. So there's advertising generally, and then we're going to look at some more specific methods of promotion. The second is sponsorship. So sponsorship is where we pay an event or an individual to either use or advertise a product. We see this in loads of different areas. We see this in sports a lot. So you see teams are sponsored with the badge on their football shirts, for example. It could be that a player is sponsored. So like Lionel Messi wears Adidas boots. It could be like LeBron James wears Nike basketball shoes. And then the idea behind that is people who like that athlete or that team will then, potentially want to wear the same shoes, wear the same clothes, wear the same shirt, etc. as their favorite players. But it's not just sports, of course. You can get sponsorship for all sorts of different things. You can get sponsorship for events. So if you think about, for example, Wimbledon, I know I'm going with sports, but sports, you see a lot of sponsorship in sports. You might see sponsors of TV programs. I think I'm a Celebrity quite often has a sponsor, just as an example. And so you are paying that company or that show or that brand or what have you to effectively say that they're sponsored by you. So sponsorship can potentially be really, really lucrative if you can find the right match between who it is that you're trying to target and try and sponsor someone that they might be interested in or something they'd be interested in. Branding, we talked about Nike and Adidas already, but the Nike logo is a really good example. I've put it on the screen there because the Nike logo is one of the most easily recognizable logos in the world. You put a tick on a t-shirt and it goes from being a £5 t-shirt to a £25 t-shirt just because of the power that brand has. And so logos can be a differentiating factor. It can be something that, effectively, if you're walking around in a Nike hoodie, you're advertising Nike for them. Everyone who sees that is looking at that hoodie, and if they like it, they're thinking that's a really nice Nike hoodie. If they like the person wearing it, they're thinking that brand is powerful by association. So that can be really impactful as well. We've also got offers. Now, offers, sales, buy one, get one free, the things like that. You'd think that they're going to be brilliant because they potentially reach more sales and potentially can get more customers involved. But there is a risk. I've put risky on there. And I think the problem here with a sale is you potentially risk, if consumers buy it at a lower price, they might feel like that is the perceived value. So they might decide that actually well, if we can get it at half price, they're not going to buy it at full price. So I've done this on a few occasions. For example, like Domino's Pizza is a really good example. I would never pay full price for Domino's Pizza because, I mean, first of all, there's always offers on, so you very rarely have to. But I just don't think it's worth the money. When I look at the price on the menu, I don't think that that's the actual price because I've never paid full price for one because you can always get on offer. And that works in other ways as well. So quite often I'll buy like Newcastle United's training gear for like when I'm using like for workout gear if I'm in the gym. And I like the training gear, but I know that at the end of each season they're going to put it all on sale. So I won't buy it at full price. I'll just wait until the end of the season. I'll buy like the t-shirts for 15 quid instead of 35 quid. And yeah, okay, that means that I don't get it straight away. And there's a risk that it might sell out. But history's taught me that actually you can get it for 15 quid. And so my perceived value for those t-shirts is 15 quid. I'm not willing to pay any more than that. So offers and sales can backfire. Of course, obviously they can lead to an increase in sales and increase in reputation as well. Trials is a similar example. Trials are great, especially if your product is something that people maybe wouldn't necessarily try. If it's something new and different, especially if it's like a food flavor or a drink flavor that might be quite unique. Offering users a sample to try, if they maybe wouldn't have tried it or wouldn't have paid to try it, and then they try it and they really, really like it, that potentially can encourage a bit of loyalty and a bit of positive reputation. So trials are always another method of promotion. But technology is really where the big focus is. And in particular, we think about social media. So the businesses have got a presence on things like Instagram, Snapchat, and TikTok. We think about advertising, and we're going to talk more about advertising for this in a second. But not only do you see an advert every maybe 3 stories or every 3 posts, but these businesses also post they have their own brand pages on there. So if you're a fan of those brands, you might follow ASOS, for example, you might follow Zara, you might see examples of their clothing. But what it also allows you to do, which is really important, is it allows you to have targeted advertising. Now, this can try and really avoid wasted spend because it can be based on like the history of the user. So, for example, if I've searched online for a new pair of jeans, I might get loads of adverts on Instagram for jeans. If I've been talking to someone, I swear it listens to you. If I've been talking to someone about like how I need a new lawnmower, I might get adverts for a new lawnmower. My phone's right next to me, so I'm probably definitely going to get adverts for a lawnmower now. And it was just an example. I don't actually need a lawnmower. But that's kind of the point, right? And those targeted advertisements can be really, really effective if you can target the right group of people. I really probably should target these videos. If I targeted these videos at people in the UK aged between 14 and 16, then the chances of me finding people who are wanting to study GCSE business or are about to do their exams is much, much higher. So, this gets used all the time. 2.2.4 place. The first thing we need to understand in terms of distribution is what this actually means. It's about getting our products from the producer to the consumer. And we've got a few little terms that are worth bearing in mind here. So the term of retailer, a retailer is just an organization that sells a product to a customer. But we've also got a few little we mentioned e-commerce in the 2.1 video. E-commerce is selling online and an e-tailer is obviously selling online as well. So what's the distinction? Well, it's worth just bearing in mind that for a lot of businesses, e-commerce is selling their own products, but there are some businesses out there that sell other businesses' products on their website, much in the same way that like a shop might sell other brands in their shop. An e-tailer does the same thing online. So if you think about like Nike, for example, Nike's website, we've mentioned Nike already, Nike's website only sells Nike goods, whereas ASOS sells ASOS goods, Nike goods, River Island goods. They sell all sorts of different brands on there. So ASOS would be an example of an e-tailer rather than just an e-commerce business. The main kind of new stuff, the main technical stuff in this is the distribution channels. So the distribution channels, we've got 2 types. We've got our direct distribution channels and we've got our indirect distribution channels. Quite clearly the difference is that one of them is direct and one of them is indirect. There are other versions of the indirect one, but let's just talk about what this really means and why it's important. A direct distribution channel means that the producer who makes the product sells it directly to the consumer. This can quite often happen online. So, for example, if you manufacture something in your garage, you could, if you manufacture something in your garage, you can make it in the garage and then sell it online to a customer, and then you've done the entire process. Now, the benefits to this are you get to keep all of the profit. You don't have to, let anyone else make the profit on that product. But it does mean you have to incur the costs associated with actually putting it all together and setting up the website and delivering the product and what have you. The alternative is to use an indirect procedure, which is the channel where we go producer to wholesaler, wholesaler to small store to customer, as an example. You could skip the wholesaler in some businesses. So why do businesses use this indirect if they could make all the money themselves? Well, actually, it's a lot of work, and it might actually cost more to put together all of those things than it would to just let someone else make the little bit of profit who's already got those systems set up. So for example, if we take like a loaf of bread, the producer might sell to a wholesaler and they might make the bread for 50p. Now they want to make a profit, so they're going to sell it for 75p. Well, the wholesaler needs to make a profit as well. So the wholesaler is going to sell it to the small store, the retailer, for maybe £1. And then the small store needs to make a profit, so they're going to charge the customers 125. So you end up paying 125 for what was a 50p loaf of bread. But you have to do that because these businesses need to make a profit. And if you think about someone like Tesco, Tesco could be the retailer. They're not a small store, but it could be like a supermarket. They've got God knows how many products, potentially over 100,000 products, different products in their store. If they had to organise getting and receiving the deliveries from over 100,000 different suppliers, it would be a nightmare. So quite often what they'll do is they'll use a wholesaler. So the wholesaler will buy all of the goods from different businesses, and then the wholesaler will sell to Tesco and deliver to Tesco. And then Tesco might just go to 5 wholesalers for different things, for different areas of things, but it means they don't have to then go to 100,000 different businesses to sort that out. So yes, they will get a cut, but it does make the process a bit easier for businesses. So it depends really on in terms of how they decide to work it. The last bit of 2.2 is using the market mix. I'm not going to say very much on this because we've talked about it already, but the key thing here is that our parts of our market mix must work together. They must match. So for example, we talk about the match between product and price. Your product quality has to match the price that you're charging, but also like the price and promotion as well. Like if you're setting a certain price, you need to be able to target people who are going to be able to pay that price. You're going to have to potentially, if you're Aldi, I mentioned Aldi as an earlier example as well, your advertisements are going to be about your price. And so there's a link between these things. So the market mix is not for individual decisions. It's for decisions that form a collective. They should all work together. And if you get your market mix right, you're more likely to have a product that reaches a high level of sales. So hopefully that was helpful. Hopefully not too long a recap on 2.2. If you've got any questions, chuck them in the comments and then have a look at the other videos for the rest of Theme 2 and Theme 1 as well. Cheers.